The first time I saw my name trending online, it wasn't because I'd launched something. It was because someone had leaked a photo of a notebook page, handwritten, messy, human, and captioned it with a sentence designed to be repeated. She stole the idea. Here's the proof. I was standing backstage at the Crownlight Innovation Summit, the biggest event my company had ever been invited to. My dress was pressed. My microphone pack was taped to my back. My team was 3 feet away watching the stage manager count down. 10 minutes until I went live. 10 minutes until I announced a partnership that would triple our revenue. And then my assistant, Juno, shoved her phone in front of my face, eyes wide. Ava, you need to see this. On the screen, a blurry photo of a page titled Project Mirror with diagrams and bullet points. It looked like my writing. It looked like my early sketches. It looked like the first version of the thing that made my company valuable, but under the photo was a second image. A beige paper receipt, faded ink, a thrift store logo, and stamped across it in red like a judge slamming a gavel. Proof. The caption said, "She bought the prototype, she didn't build it." My stomach didn't drop. It sharpened, because I knew exactly what they were doing. They weren't trying to beat me. They were trying to make everyone hesitate. Because hesitation kills partnerships faster than any rival product. I looked up from the phone and saw him at the end of the hallway, smiling like a proud mentor. Miles Calder. The man who once told me I was too quiet to lead. The man whose company tried to recruit my engineers last year. The man who was scheduled to introduce me on stage tonight. He held up a small leather notebook in his hand and gave me a friendly nod. Like we were on the same side. Like he hadn't just lit a match under my name. Then he mouthed 2 words, silent but clear. "Be careful," Juno whispered. I stared at the receipt image again. Something felt not emotionally. Technically, the receipt had a date printed at the top, and my eyes locked on it the way they lock on logs and timestamps when something's wrong. Because I recognized the format, not the store, the font, the spacing. The receipt wasn't from a thrift shop at all. It was from a thermal printer model used in storage facilities. Someone had used a thrift store logo to make it feel like a childhood insult, to make it feel personal, to make it feel true. I exhaled slowly, and I did the one thing they never expected. I smiled, not because I was confident, because I was certain. Then I reached into my clutch and pulled out a small object I carried everywhere, now a flat metal card no bigger than a credit card. It wasn't glamorous. It wasn't expensive, but it could destroy a lie in seconds. I handed it to Juno and said, "Get this to the control booth. Now." Juno blinked. "What is it?" I looked down the hall at Miles Calder and said quietly, "It's the original receipt, and it's not going to prove what he thinks. If you like stories where the quiet one doesn't beg, doesn't panic, and doesn't fold, hit like and subscribe. And comment what country you're watching from, because this kind of betrayal isn't limited to one place. I need you to understand something about me before you assume I'm brave. I'm not fearless. I'm trained. When you grow up being treated like you require less, you learn to survive by being observant. You notice tone shifts. You notice who interrupts you. You notice who repeats your words louder and gets credit for them. And you learn a dangerous truth. People don't always steal your money. Sometimes they steal your story. When I was 12, my older sister used to call me the thrift store girl. Not cruel at first. Just casual. Like a label you don't realize is permanent until you look up and see it stitched into the way everyone treats you. If something broke, I fixed it. If something was too expensive, I went without. If someone needed help, I offered it quietly. I learned how to simplify myself so nobody could accuse me of being too much. My sister, let's call her Claire, because I'm done giving her the dignity of anonymity, was the opposite. Loud, certain, center of the room. My parents moved around her like gravity. I moved around the edges. No one ever said I was less valuable. They just behaved like I required less. And for years, I agreed. I left home early without drama. A job in a different city. A small apartment. Fewer calls. I built my life like a quiet stack of bricks. One job, one skill, one decision at a time. Eventually those bricks became a company. Not overnight. Not with a viral moment. With discipline that looked boring from the outside and felt lonely on the inside. My company is called Lumenfold. We create AI-assisted localization for training content, voice, timing, cultural nuance so global organizations can train people accurately. We're the boring backbone behind what big brands call scalable education. Our work matters because it prevents mistakes, protects trust, and makes knowledge travel without getting mangled. And trust is the only currency that actually compounds. That's why the summit mattered. Because tonight I wasn't just speaking. Tonight I was signing a partnership with Arcadia Learning Network, a major platform with millions of users. Their CEO, Nina Park, had invited me personally. She'd watched our work for months. She believed in our ethics, our accuracy, our calmness. The kind of partner who doesn't care about charisma. She cares about consistency, which is why the smear campaign was timed for tonight. Because the easiest way to kill a deal is not to argue the product. It's to poison the founder. And Miles Calder knew that. Miles Calder runs a company called CalderWorks. They're not direct competitors. They're adjacent. They build enterprise tools. They partner with the same people. They hunt the same contracts. They're the kind of company that shows up in rooms like this with a booth twice the size of yours and an ego 3 times bigger. Miles first entered my life 3 years ago, before Lumenfold had a real name people recognized. I'd been invited to a smaller conference to speak on a panel about ethical AI. Miles moderated. He was charming in that polished executive way, smooth sentences, controlled laughter, steady eye contact. After the panel, he pulled me aside and said, "You're brilliant, but you're too quiet." I smiled politely. He continued like he was giving me a gift. "If you want to scale, you need a stronger voice. You need someone who can sell you." I told him I already had a voice. He laughed and said, "No, you have a mind. It's different." That was the first time I realized something important. Miles didn't see me as a peer. He saw me as a resource. A thing to package. A thing to control. A year later, Calderworks tried to recruit my lead engineer, then my product manager, then my head of partnerships. They didn't offer more money. They offered visibility. They offered a bigger stage. They offered the same lie powerful people offer quiet talent. You'll be more valuable in our shadow. My team didn't bite. And I thought that was the end. It wasn't. It was just Miles changing tactics. Instead of stealing my people, he decided to steal my credibility. And he chose the most public night of my career to do it. Backstage, I watched the trending post climb. Thousands of shares. Comments pouring in. Exposed. Knew it. Always seemed too perfect. Receipts don't lie. The words weren't just accusations. They were invitations. Invitations for partners to hesitate, to pause, to wait for clarification. And that's all it takes. One pause. One delayed signature. One board meeting where someone says, "Do we want to risk it?" Miles Calder had built a story in advance. A story where I was not an inventor, but a buyer. Not a builder, but a collector. Not a founder, but a fraud. And he'd planted the prop that made it feel personal. A thrift store receipt. Because a receipt is powerful. People don't argue with receipts. They accept them, even when they're fake. I turned to my team. "Where's Nina?" I asked. Juno pointed toward the green room down the hall. "She's meeting with her legal counsel," she said. "They saw the post." Of course they did. Arcadia was careful. They weren't going to sign something while my name was trending in the wrong direction. I nodded once. "Okay," I said. "Then we don't go on stage until Nina looks me in the eye." Juno swallowed. "The schedule." "I don't care," I said calmly. "That's the difference between being quiet and being weak. I don't fight for attention. But when it matters, I don't ask permission either." I walked toward the green room. Miles saw me coming and stepped into my path, smiling like a benevolent guide. "Ava," he said warmly. "Tough timing." I didn't stop walking. "Tough strategy," I corrected. His smile stayed. "You know how the internet is," he said softly. "People get confused. Things spread." I looked at him for the first time like he was not a colleague, not a mentor, not a friendly executive, like he was a problem. "Did you bring the notebook?" I asked. Miles blinked. "I'm sorry?" he said. I nodded toward the leather notebook in his hand. "That," I said. "The one everyone is saying proves I stole my idea." Miles laughed lightly, like I was paranoid. "This? It's just something someone sent me." "Who?" I asked. His smile flickered. He recovered quickly. "I don't know," he said. "Anonymous tip." I held his gaze. "Interesting," I said, "because anonymous tips don't come with my handwriting." His eyes hardened for a fraction of a second. Then he leaned closer, voice lowered like he was trying to help me. "Ava, I'm actually on your side," he said. But if you walk into that green room unprepared, you'll spook Nina. I smiled faintly. I'm not unprepared, I replied. Then I stepped around him. And behind me, I heard him say too quietly for anyone else to notice, "You don't want this war." He was wrong. I didn't want war. I wanted clarity. And clarity always feels like war to people who survive on blur. Inside the green room, Nina Park stood with her counsel and two Arcadia executives. Nina looked calm, but her eyes were evaluating me the way serious partners evaluate risk. She held her phone up without accusation. "Ava," she said, "we need to address this." I nodded. "We do," I said. She showed me the post. The notebook page. The receipt. The red proof stamp. Her counsel spoke carefully. "We're not making conclusions," he said. "But we can't proceed with a public signing if there's a credible ownership dispute." Ownership dispute. That phrase is a guillotine in corporate rooms. Even if it's false, it slows everything down. I looked at Nina. "May I ask one question?" I said. Nina nodded. I pointed to the receipt image. "Do you know what that receipt printer is?" I asked. Nina blinked. "A receipt printer?" Her counsel looked annoyed. "Ava, this isn't about printer models." "It is," I said calmly. I stepped closer and zoomed in. "The heat pattern, the font spacing, the timestamp alignment," I said. "This was printed from a storage facility terminal. Not a thrift shop. Not a retail store. Someone used a thrift logo because it triggers a narrative." Nina's expression sharpened slightly. Her counsel paused. "What are you saying?" Nina asked. "I'm saying," I replied, "this is staged, and whoever staged it doesn't understand receipts as well as I do." Then I pulled the metal card from my clutch, the one I gave Juno to run to the control booth. It wasn't a credit card. It was a verification key, a hardware token tied to our digital notarization system. For the past year, I'd been notarizing every major milestone in our R&D process, not because I expected drama, because I expected humans. Humans get tempted. Humans get greedy. Humans get creative when they can't compete. Nina's counsel leaned in. "What is that?" he asked. I kept my voice calm and boring. "The original timestamp record of Project Mirror's first build," I said, "and a chain of custody log tied to our internal system." Nina stared at me for a long second. Then she said, "Show me." I nodded. "Not here," I said. "On the big screen." Nina's eyes widened slightly. "On stage?" "Not on stage," I corrected. "In the control booth, where the cameras and recordings are." Nina looked at her counsel. He hesitated. "That's unusual." I smiled slightly. "So is trying to ruin a founder in real time," I replied. Then I added, "If you want a safe deal, you want the truth on record." Nina nodded once, decisive. "Let's go," she said. We walked together toward the control booth. And that's when Miles Calder stepped into view again, like he'd been waiting for his cue. He looked at Nina, then at me, and smiled with practiced concern. "Nina," he said, "I'm sorry you're dealing with this." Nina didn't smile back. She said one sentence that made the air change. "Miles, did you have something to do with this?" Miles laughed lightly, hands open. "Of course not," he said. "I'm just trying to protect the event." Protect the event. That was cute. People like Miles always position themselves as protectors. It makes their control look like responsibility. I kept walking. Miles followed. "Look," he said softly to me. "Don't make this worse." I glanced at him. "You already did," I replied. Then I opened the control booth door. Inside, screens glowed. Sound engineers watched timelines. Camera feeds split into boxes. Juno was there, holding the hardware token like it was a grenade. Her eyes locked on mine. "You sure?" she whispered. I nodded. "Do it," I said. Juno plugged the token into the console laptop. I entered a code. A dashboard opened clean, simple, factual. A timeline of Project Mirror's development. Dates. Hashes. Internal approvals. Audio notice. And the one thing that mattered most, a digital timestamp from 2 years ago, marking the first build artifact. Nina's counsel leaned in, reading carefully. "This is," he began. "Independent," I said. "It can be verified without trusting me. That's the point of notarization. Not believe me, verify me." Nina's eyes moved over the data. Then she looked up. "This proves you had the project years before today," she said. "Yes," I replied. "It proves the idea wasn't purchased last week," her counsel added. "Yes," I said again. Miles Calder's voice came from behind us, still smooth. Digital records can be faked, he said. I turned to him calmly. They can, I agreed. Which is why I didn't bring just digital records. I nodded to Juno. She clicked a folder labeled Physical Receipts Archive. On screen appeared a scanned image of a real receipt. Not a thrift logo. A storage facility. Unit Rental. My name. My signature. And a line item. Lock replacement customer request. Dated 2 years ago. Nina stared. What is this? She asked. I kept my voice steady. It's the receipt for the storage unit where my prototype hardware was kept before we moved to our lab, I said. Then I pointed to the trending receipt image on Nina's phone. And the fake receipt online uses the same printer model. I paused. Except they forgot one thing. Miles frowned slightly. What? I zoomed in on the printed receipt on screen. At the bottom, I said, this terminal prints a transaction code that matches the facility's internal ledger. I looked at Nina's counsel. You can call them and verify it, I said. He nodded slowly, already understanding. Miles's smile tightened. I could see the shift. This wasn't just me defending myself anymore. This was me turning his prop into a trail. But Miles still had one move left. He lifted the leather notebook. Fine, he said. Let's talk about the notebook then. He opened it and held up a page on camera feed. This, he said, is Ava's idea in her handwriting. His voice was steady, like he'd rehearsed this. But do you know where I got it? He continued. He looked at Nina. Ava gave it to me, he said. My pulse stayed calm, because now I knew exactly what his play was. Twist Layer 1 was supposed to be, Ava stole it. Twist Layer 2 was supposed to be, Ava gave it to me. He was trying to claim consent. He was trying to turn betrayal into agreement. I nodded slowly. Miles, I said, show the inside cover. He blinked. What? Show the inside cover, I repeated. His eyes narrowed. But he opened the notebook and flipped to the inside cover. And his face changed. Because on the inside cover was a tiny printed label. A library-style label. With a barcode. Miles tried to cover it with his thumb. Too late. Juno zoomed the camera feed in. The barcode was visible to everyone in the booth. Nina's counsel leaned closer. Miles, he said quietly. What is that? Miles' mouth tightened. I spoke calmly, like I was explaining a boring fact. That notebook, I said, is not mine. It belongs to the Crown Light Summit Green Room Supply Cabinet. Silence. Nina blinked. What? I nodded. The Summit keeps notebooks for speakers, I explained. They're labeled so staff can track inventory. Miles' jaw clenched. He tried to laugh. That's ridiculous, he said. I looked at the sound engineer. Can you pull the supply list? I asked. The engineer hesitated, then clicked a tab. An inventory sheet opened. Item: leather speaker notebook barcode 44719. I pointed. Match the barcode, I said. Juno zoomed. It matched. Nina's counsel let out a slow breath. Miles, he said, why are you holding event inventory and presenting it as evidence? Miles' voice shifted sharper now. Because the real evidence is the handwriting, he snapped. I nodded. Great, I said. Then let's talk handwriting. And this is where the second twist hit hard. Because the handwriting wasn't mine. It was Claire's. How do I know? Because I grew up watching her copy my homework and tell teachers she helped. Because I'd seen her imitate my cursive, sloppy on purpose to look authentic. Because quiet people recognize patterns, loud people forget. I turned to Nina. I want to show you one more thing, I said. I reached into my clutch and pulled out the prop that would end the entire game. A small clear plastic sleeve. Inside it, a single index card with handwriting on it. My handwriting. Except, it wasn't mine either. It was the handwriting from the notebook. Juno looked confused. Nina's counsel frowned. I explained. This is a controlled sample, I said. When we onboard executives at Lumenfold, we do a basic identity verification. It includes a handwriting sample for internal security. Nina's counsel raised an eyebrow. Security? I nodded. Because social manipulation is real, I said. And people impersonate others more often than you think. Then I looked directly at Miles. Miles, you've never been through our onboarding, I said. So you don't know what we store. His eyes flicked. I continued, calm and deadly. But Claire has. Miles froze. That name landing in the booth was like someone dropping a glass. Nina looked at me. Claire? My sister, I said. Nina's counsel leaned in. Why would your sister? Because this isn't a competitor attack, I said quietly. This is a family pattern wearing a business suit. Then I nodded to Juno. Pull Claire's onboarding file, I said. Juno's fingers moved quickly. A file opened. There it was, Claire's handwriting sample. Because last year Claire had tried to help me with partnerships. She'd asked to join my company as a consultant. She'd smiled and said she wanted to repair our relationship. I didn't hire her. But I did let her on board as a temporary contractor for 2 weeks. Because I wanted to see what she would do. And I wanted the system to remember. The handwriting sample popped on screen. Nina's counsel stared. Because the loops matched. The slant matched. The pressure matched. Miles's evidence handwriting was Claire's. Not mine. Miles swallowed. He tried to speak. Nothing came out at first. Then he snapped. This is insane. I smiled faintly. No, I said. This is documented. Nina turned slowly toward Miles. Miles, she said, voice calm but final. Are you working with her? Miles' face tightened. He tried to recover the room. No, he said. This is Ava manipulating you. He stopped. Because in front of him, Nina's counsel had already pulled up the trending post again, and looked at the receipt image, and then looked at the storage receipt on our screen, and then looked at Miles's face. And you could see the conclusion forming. This wasn't internet confusion. This was coordinated. Nina's counsel turned to the summit's production manager. I need a copy of all camera feeds from the green room and backstage, he said. Miles' eyes widened. No, he barked. That's not necessary. Nina's counsel didn't even look at him. It is, he said calmly. And Miles Calder realized, too late, that his biggest mistake wasn't the smear. It was choosing a night with cameras. Because cameras don't care about charisma. They care about facts. Nina looked at me. Ava, she said quietly, what do you want to do? I exhaled. That question mattered. Because revenge stories often end with destruction. But I didn't build my life for destruction. I built it for freedom. I looked at Miles. Then at Nina. Then at my team. And I made my choice. We sign, I said. Nina blinked. Her counsel looked surprised. Miles's eyes flickered hope. For half a second. I continued, calm and clear. We sign, I repeated. And we do it on stage. But first, I added, turning to the production manager. I want 60 seconds on the mic before the announcement. The production manager hesitated. Nina nodded once. Give it to her, she said. We walked out of the booth. Miles followed, pale and furious. He leaned toward me and hissed. You're going to regret humiliating me. I didn't look at him. You humiliated yourself, I said. Then I stepped onto the stage. The lights were bright. The crowd was warm with expectation. The big screen behind me glowed with the Summit logo. I took the microphone. For 1 second, the old version of me tried to surface. The thrift store girl. The one who makes things smooth. The one who doesn't make noise. I ignored her. Not because she was weak. Because she was tired. I looked out at the audience and said, Tonight, a false story started spreading online about me and my work. A murmur rippled. I held up my hand. I'm not here to argue, I said. I'm here to verify. I nodded to the control booth. The screen behind me switched to a simple timeline. Project Mirror. Dates. Verification. Receipts. Then I said the sentence that killed the entire smear in one clean hit. Receipts don't lie. But not all receipts are real. The audience leaned in. I continued. The receipt circulating online today is not from a thrift store. It's from a storage facility printer with a logo added to trigger a narrative. I paused. And the notebook page being circulated is not mine. It's event inventory. Another murmur sharper now. I didn't attack anyone by name. I didn't rant. I just stayed factual. And because I believe trust matters, I said, I've provided verification materials to Arcadia and Event Council. Then I smiled, calm. Now, I said, let's talk about the future. Nina walked on stage beside me. She took the mic and said, Arcadia verifies Lumenfold's work and integrity. Applause burst like a wave. And that applause wasn't just for the deal. It was for the clean feeling of truth winning over noise. We signed. Cameras flashed. The partnership became real. And behind the stage curtain, Miles Calder stood frozen, his mouth slightly open. Because he'd expected panic. He'd expected pleading. He'd expected me to beg privately while he controlled the narrative publicly. Instead, I did the one thing he couldn't compete with. I made the truth boring. And boring truth beats exciting lies every time. After the stage, I walked into a private meeting room with Nina's counsel and the Summit legal team. Miles was there too, invited, not by him, but because he was now part of the record. The legal team asked for his phone. Not dramatically. Professionally. He refused. Then Nina's counsel said, "Miles, if this is a misunderstanding, cooperating clears you." Miles' jaw tightened. He handed it over. Because refusing would look worse. And this is where the final twist landed like a satisfying door click. The phone wasn't the key. The key was the message draft. Because when they opened his drafts, there it was. A text thread with a contact labeled only C. Claire. They didn't need my family history. They had timestamps. Messages coordinating the thrift store logo, the notebook page, the upload timing. And one sentence from Claire that made even the lawyers pause. "Make it hit right before she signs. She'll fold. She always folds." I stared at that line for a long second. Not because it hurt. Because it revealed how little they'd updated their understanding of me. Claire still believed I was 12. Still believed my quiet was ownership. Still believed I existed to stabilize her. Miles looked at me, eyes burning, and said through clenched teeth, "You set me up." I shook my head. "No," I said calmly. "You walked into a room full of cameras with a lie. And you thought I wouldn't check the receipt." Silence. Then the summit's counsel said, "Miles, you're no longer welcome at Crownlight events." Nina's counsel added, "And Arcadia will not work with Calder Works." Miles's face went blank. Not anger. Loss. Because he hadn't just failed to ruin me. He'd ruined himself. By being loud. By being sloppy. By underestimating a quiet woman with receipts. Later that night, my phone buzzed. A message from Claire. One line, "You think you won?" I stared at it for a second. Then I replied with the only truth that mattered. "I didn't win. I stopped playing your game." Then I blocked her. Because the ending of a good revenge drama isn't fireworks. It's silence. A boundary holding. A door that doesn't drift open again. I walked back into my hotel room, kicked off my heels, and sat on the edge of the bed. My hands trembled slightly then. Not from fear. From release. Because the truth is, I had carried that childhood label for too long. Thrift store girl. The one who needs less. The one who makes it easier. And tonight, in front of a room full of people, I didn't prove I was worthy. I proved I was untouchable. Not because I'm powerful. Because I'm precise. Because I document. Because I verify. Because I don't beg anymore. And because I learned something simple that people like Miles and Claire will never understand. You can't steal someone's story if they kept the receipts. If you stayed to the end, hit like. It helps this reach the people who are being played in silence. And subscribe if you want more twist-heavy, smart, emotional stories where the quiet one finally draws the line.